Welcome to It's Personal, Finance Canada. I'm Christine Conway.
And I'm Cameron Conway.
And this podcast is a very personal look at personal finance in Canada. Welcome to It's Personal Finance Canada. I'm Christine Conway, here with Cameron Conway. And if you're in BC, Alberta, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, Ontario, or the Yukon, feel free to find us at braunfinancial.com. This week, I was reading Nudge, the Final Edition. This is a book about behavioral economics, one of my favorite topics, and it was written by real-life professors, academics that have studied and researched this thoroughly. It was authored by Richard Thaler and Cass Sunstein, both professors, and Richard Thaler actually won the 2017 Nobel Memorial Prize in Economic Sciences for his contribution to behavioral economics. And Cass Sunstein was also a prize winner as well with the Holberg Prize for outstanding contributions.
Yeah, so this is the field of study that either determines why you spend your money, or if on the other side of it, it determines why you're not spending enough of your money.
This book was actually all about how we fight our own human nature and how we're influenced on the day-to-day as we make our decisions. It's very, very true that we are so easily influenced. It seems to be in our human nature. And that was the premise of the book. We are being nudged or pushed in certain directions, sometimes more gently than others, all of the time.
Yes, it can be anything from when you're on social media to when you're watching TV, when you're out and about, when you're at a grocery store. It's just those simple little reminders and those little pushes for you to do a certain thing, like scroll up and push the subscribe button right now.
That was not at all self-seeking, and you should absolutely examine the motives of everyone telling you to do anything.
Please press the button.
5 stars. But this is why a book like this is helpful. And this is why behavioral economics is so powerful. We are becoming more aware of when we're being influenced and when a company or a marketer or CAM is trying to prompt us to make a decision or take an action. This is super helpful for us because we get to understand ourselves better. It's kind of like a sneak peek into our own default mode setting and figuring out where our blind spots are so that we can be more aware, and when they come up, we can pay a little bit more attention.
Yeah, because there's all these competing factors that are trying to incentivize you to follow a certain path, to do a certain task, to purchase a certain thing, to walk through the store in a certain way. So the more you can better understand this, the better your wallet will be prepared. Because just don't believe this? Go walk through a grocery store and ask yourself, why are all these cardboard cutouts on the side of the aisles? Why can't 2 people walk down this aisle? It's to slow you down to buy more stuff. So it's all these handy little things so you know what's actually going on.
And the decision makers that lay out those pathways or that lay out where to click next if you're doing something online, these are what the authors refer to as choice architects. They are strategic. They are using the data that you and other people like you are giving them. And they have this understanding, as we're learning as well, that our logic does not always win out. And this was interesting to me because this is not at all a book about emotions or emotional regulation. This is more about our hardwiring and how our brains are designed to conserve energy and to make choices in a manner that is as easy as possible.
Yeah, some of the other times we've talked about this subject, we kind of lean pretty hard into how the emotional side can lead you astray. But with this book, it's a lot more clear cut on that this is part of the autonomic response, and this is how your brain filters things. So you can be perfectly calm and reserved and still make bad choices.
Well, and I'll get right to it. The author's main point that was repeated over and over again through the chapters, through the book. And like I said, these are academics. These are behavioral economic experts. They said if you want something done, you have to make it as easy as possible. Eliminate the sludge, all of the difficult stuff that drags us down and makes a choice hard, or makes the paperwork or the opting out or the changing of a decision hard. What is easy will win our choices more often than not, period.
And if you don't understand how this works, just watch an infomercial. The whole thing is just a giant sales funnel to convince you that this is a good idea, it's a smart idea. Other people have made this idea, so now click the button or call the number. It's the same process over and over again.
Well, and they actually spoke to what they called kind of that snake oil salesman type. And I'm going to quote a little bit here because I think it's important. And I quote, "No choice architect in the public or private sector should adopt a policy that he or she would not be willing to defend publicly," end quote. So there's always the morality behind things, but businesses don't always think that way. Sometimes the primary objective is to maximize profit.
Yes, I would argue the morality argument. The point is that you're willing to defend it publicly. Doesn't mean it's right. Doesn't mean it's good. You're just willing to fight for it.
Well, and would you be able to talk about it openly if it became public knowledge with what you were doing behind closed doors? So I think that's the morality component that is sometimes missing in business and sometimes missing when we are trying to be motivated to take an action. So let's talk for a minute about some of the default settings that we all have. We all have kind of these cheat sheets that are built in. It has some information about how we make quick decisions and the biases that we use. So I'm going to run through a few of them pretty quick. The first one is known as anchoring and adjustment. And this is where you take something that you know and then you kind of guess a little. You adjust, you estimate, but it gives you some knowledge. It gives you a starting point and it gives you an maybe accurate, maybe not estimation at the end of it. Another thing that we might default to is remembering a situation that either had a really good or really bad impact. So this could be the outcome enhanced our confidence. It could have been fear-based. It could have been good. It could have been bad. But when we remember how we reacted in a similar situation, it creates a type of bias for us.
Yeah, I like to kind of mix the two together. And if I see the same ad over and over on Reddit, I make a mental note to never buy that product because it annoyed me too much.
That's it. Well, and then maybe you're following the status quo bias, which is basically our desire to stay the same and not buy that product. But the downside of this is the status quo bias can affect us negatively because sometimes the right decision is actually to make a change, even though we may not be willing to do so. And finally, default options. If you own a smartphone, or even if you're being asked about cookies on a website, there are always default options that are laid out for us. And there are like privacy statements that are hidden in the fine print, or click this real quick and nobody reads them, where choices are presented in a way that influences the outcome. It gets you to the place where the person creating this or the business creating this is designing you to be led. So we are more likely to stay with the factory settings, especially if either we don't care enough to dig deeper into this or we don't understand it properly.
Yeah, and the whole thing to do with the status quo is that the whole point of marketing is to convince you that your status quo is just not good enough. But at the same time, sometimes your status quo could be costing you money. You could be buying inferior products. You could be wasting money unnecessarily. So there is sort of that push and pull where your status quo could be a benefit or a hindrance. Just understand that every single marketer, marketing is nothing more than the dark side of psychology, is going to convince you that your status quo is wrong.
So this is a perfect time to enter in two main characters that the authors present. And these are archetypes, the doer and the planner.
Not to be convinced with a certified financial planner like Christine.
So let's talk about who they are and how they're described in the book. And you're right, unfortunately, I was not mentioned. But as it goes, the doer is our automatic system. It is focused on how to meet your needs right now, today, and the authors kind of lightheartedly paralleled him to Homer Simpson in pop culture, of course. So the planner is the exact opposite, with a parallel being drawn to Spock. So you have one part of your mind that is incredibly rational. It thinks things through, it sets your intention, it plans your workout schedule or your new budget or your new diet. It's logical, it's rational, it's predictable in its thought patterns. But the doer is concerned with meeting your needs now. And the authors noted that our state determined who is in control. And they called this either the hot or the cold state. So let me explain. When you're in what they called a cold state, your planner is in charge.
That means Captain Kirk got drunk and Spock is in charge of the bridge.
Spock is in charge. So like I said, logic rules the day. What you want best for yourself, the best version of your intention lives here. But when the doer takes hold, this is when you are in a state where you're more susceptible to triggers. So there could be an unmet need. There could be you're hungry or you're tired or it's been a really stressful day.
This is Homer Simpson driving past Moe's and going in to have a drink.
That's exactly it.
Or checking into work and realizing he has to work and he goes and drinks. Or he spends time with his family, realizes it's time to go drink.
It's true. But hey, wait a second there. The doer is most concerned with solving a problem today, meeting your immediate needs now, and it can overrule your best intention. It can overrule the planner mind. So this notable difference is that we are, or so it seems, in fact, of two minds. And the explanation of state, that susceptibility that you might have if you're hungry or stressed or otherwise with an unmet need, uncomfortable in some way. Yes, you're jumping into problem-solving mode, but it may not be the problem-solving mode where you in your truest form, in your planner form, is in charge. So how do you fight your doer? How do you fight this inclination to do the thing that is counter to what you want for yourself the most?
Inside you are two wolves. One wants to eat today's problem. One wants to eat tomorrow's problem.
I didn't know the problems were edible, but as it goes, you have to come with a plan ahead of time to help. There has to be made ahead for you breadcrumbs or little steps that you can take to avoid temptations or to recognize your times of most susceptibility. When do you doom scroll? When are you prone to buy online? What is leading you, like Cam said in his Homer Simpson example, towards that bar in the middle of the day or the middle of the night? At that point, you are fighting an uphill battle. So understanding this is so important. And the best way to get the outcome that you actually want is to make it easy to do so. So you have to guide yourself looking for instant gratification to a solution that's a happy compromise, or that at least gets you most of the way to what you initially intended.
Yeah, and being aware of this is where you can actually make some real progress, because when you're on social media, the algorithm wants you to do things and to spend, but the better you can keep yourself in control and be more aware of there's this prompt, there's this trigger, there's this desire, there's this problem, there's this good thing, and just having a full awareness of everything helps you manage your spending better. And this is a lot of what this book is talking about. It's if you take some awareness and stop kind of relying on like the default settings of whatever is in front of you, which is rarely for your benefit, the more control you can take back over your own life.
Well, that's right. If you're relying on other people's goodwill, it may not always work out for the best, right? Even though we wish it would. But let's talk now for a minute about our predisposition for the status quo. So this book talks so much about the data around how we absolutely love it when things do not change, and how we have a tendency to stick to something because we've chosen it in the past, even if it's no longer good for you. And I'm going to share with you in just a few minutes some real life examples that the authors shared in the book, loosely paraphrased, of course. But I'll preface it by saying there was a lot of talk in the book about pension plans, and pension plans that had opt-in options as well as automatic enrollment. And the argument has always been with a pension plan where you can opt in, this is money that you're leaving on the table. Some people call it free money. I call it money negotiated as part of your compensation. But the bottom line is it should be a no-brainer. Why would you not take this?
Well, exactly. This is like $1 left on the table ends up in the C-suite's bonus plan.
$1 left on the table that should have been yours, that was your negotiated compensation, becomes literally someone else's gain. And just because of a default option. So there was talk in the book how sometimes in these types of plans, the money market fund was used, but then people wouldn't change them and the money wouldn't grow. So the most common target date funds now are used as kind of a default option in these types of plans where people have the ability to opt in and change. So the default says, okay, we now have this data saying that you're probably not going to change your mind. So let's choose a fund that basically you put in your retirement year, you choose the fund with your retirement year, and it's going to adjust your stock to bond correlation for you and get more conservative as you get closer to your retirement.
Yeah, and this is actually one of those examples where this has actually worked out for your benefit. So instead of being stuck with a money market fund, which a lot of people were, these target date funds will actually carry you through to a decent amount of your DC pension, whatever it is. But this is showing where people are just letting things ride. Either they're not taking the pension or they are taking the pension and they're just picking whatever is the number one option on the form rather than going through it and thinking, well, what will actually be the net benefit for myself.
Well, and this is the part where in this example, a nudge can be good because by putting these target date funds in, at least you're actively investing. Like Cam said, at least you're not just in cash. At least you're in something that has some form of active management to help you out if you're not going to do anything, and it changes and evolves with you. So in some cases, these prompts can be used to benefit you. But the authors gave a couple of other examples that were so striking about the Swedish government and the pension system that they launched. And I'm going to share a bit about that here, paraphrased loosely again, of course. So we're going to take you back to 2010. As told by the authors, the Swedish government decides that they have this plan and they are going to allow the default option, so the option that most of us are likely to choose, to use leverage up to 50%. Now, anyone that knows anything about leveraging knows that this amplifies both gains and losses. And when you're in a plan like a pension, this is kind of risky because the plan is not taking into account how old you are, when your retirement is, and what your risk profile was. And it was notable in this study that the people that were responding were basically a little bit more risk adverse. So you would think that when the default option changed, people would opt out if it was no longer suitable for them. And they found that it actually didn't. And in this case, there was no barriers. There was lots of other funds to pick from. There were no transaction costs or anything else that would make it sludgy or sticky to make a change. So even when a risk profile like that had changed substantially, the power of the default option was, even when it was very well communicated to the plan members that, hey, you've increased your risk, hey, this has changed, do something if you'd like, here's how you can, people still didn't take action.
Yeah, so again, this is an option where they said, do you want a pension? They said, yeah. And then they just didn't bother to change what the allocation was. This was just the stock options. Maybe they had this insight that, if we just put this really risky fund, it'll force people to read through and pick something more appropriate. But the numbers showed that didn't happen. They just kind of stuck with this very high risk option rather than pulling it back down to what their risk profile should have allowed for.
Well, and we're dealing with a lot of educated people as well, right? We're dealing with people that are competently making good decisions for themselves in other areas of life. But the point of the narrative here was that the default option carried that much power. And to continue on the story and fast forward it a little bit to 2017, in this same scheme, the same pension plan, there were third-party fund managers, fund companies allowed. And one of them, there was some rumors that there was trouble, there was potential fraud within the company. And this was in the paper. It was all over the news, and the Swedish pension agency even went as far as prohibiting people to switch into the funds run by this company. Now, you would think that would be a massive disincentive, and people would move out of it like wildfire. But they did not. And I quote, only 1.4% of this company's investors sold their shares. And they said that even after this firm's accounting firm resigned and reported them to the local authorities, only 16.5% of the start of the year investors had elected to move money out of that to some other fund. End loose quote. So that is wild. We have two situations here where the status quo is horrible. It is not a good choice for the people, potentially. I mean, the leverage one is a little bit more subjective, but the second one, when we're dealing with actual fraud, red flags all over the place, right? But people were still not making decisions that benefited them. And they found further in researching this that even though they were encouraging people to be more active in their decision making, even the ones that chose to actively pick funds, they would still become more passive with the passing of time. So we are all so inclined that once we've convinced ourselves that we've made a good decision, We don't want to make a change. It's hard for us to admit defeat, take a loss, and move on.
Yeah, and this is kind of like a 50-50 thing too, where perhaps some people didn't know that this came about. Some people just don't want to pay attention to the news. And then there's some people that they just always had this fund. They didn't care that the company did a little bit of like fiscal victimdom, and they just stuck to what they knew and just held to it despite the prevalent evidence that was before them. Or again, some people just may not have realized this because why bother reading the paper?
Or this could show us how we are so stuck in inertia and how it's against our very human nature. We resist change. And we could argue that, yes, sometimes we don't fully understand things, and in that context, it's natural to resist them. But how do we justify it when something is clearly not in our best interest? So maybe there's too many choices. Maybe it's overly daunting. Maybe we're afraid of making a mistake. We all want and we value autonomy, but at the same time, we choose differently based on how information is presented to us. And that is the power of a nudge.
Yeah, because at its core, a change is difficult. You have some people that are stuck very strongly on the I don't want to change spectrum. Some people are on the I want to change all the time, when the happy medium is somewhat in the middle. But there's change in every one of those steps. And this is the big thing that people get caught up in, is they don't want to make the change. They don't want to take the risk of the change. They don't want to think about what could be different, right or wrong, if I go through with this change, because then it's something new and different and scary. Or even just be, if you don't make a change, it can be equally daunting and scary and ups and downs.
Well, and I think that brings us to a good point, that even with education, even with prompting, if there is no desire to change, we can't manufacture that. It just won't happen. So you have to intrinsically want it and pursue it there. Now, the authors made some other financial points that I think were worth mentioning here. There can be so much confusion around financial products. There is absolutely no shortage of choice. So the authors kind of took this and split it into two categories: the tools themselves and how we use them. So a good tool can be misused if it's in the wrong hand, as much as a bad tool can be. And it's up to us to know the difference. So this was kind of the ultimate buyer beware. And the authors said this is where professionals, financial professionals, mortgage brokers, as the product moves, the professional that moves with it, this can be good, but of course the authors had guidelines to that too. So they talked a bit about credit cards, mortgages, and insurance. And I think it helps us to look at an economic perspective and see how they summed it up. So I'll do it for you really quick. So let's talk for a minute about credit cards. If you don't have money and you want to spend now, what are you going to do, Cam?
Buy something illegally with a credit card?
Well, credit cards opened up this whole world of buy now, pay later, right? And this became a classic planner versus doer problem.
I thought it was a buy now, pay question mark.
Pay eventually. Well, but think about it. When we use credit cards, we're kind of in this rolling process of money where money gets spent before it's earned. And we're left in this cycle of having a little bit less and a little bit less between the interest charges and the admin costs, and just being that much more behind. So it gets harder and harder to get out of this hole. And I mean, even Cam and I, we were talking about our own personal finances, and we're big advocates of using credit cards for points and bonus systems. But even then, it can be hard sometimes, and you can kind of lose it. It's kind of that death by 1,000 cuts. So even us, we're going back to cash, back to basics for a bit, where you set a spending limit and you stick to it. And when the money's gone, your ability to spend extra for that month or for that pay period is gone too. And you get to start clean every month.
Yeah, and we're kind of talking about credit cards quickly here because really this is the path of least resistance to give into the various nudges that are trying to pull your finances and your time and your energy out of you.
Well, absolutely. I mean, on the pro side, this debt is giving you a quality of life that you would not have otherwise, right? And that can be both good or bad. It can be good if you get something like a mortgage where you're building home equity, but it can be bad if you're getting stuck on this cycle of credit card debt where you're just buying stuff that depreciates, stuff that doesn't hold value. And this is the nature of credit card debt. Everyone who has it knows that it's not good, but the psychology is so interesting because we do it anyways because it enhances our lives now.
So then I guess every time you are kind of out shopping when you're scrolling, you have to start really asking yourself, what are all these little subliminal nudges and impressions? What are they trying to lead me towards? And is this actually something that's going to benefit me? Is this something that's going to help me solve a problem? Is it better than my status quo? Is it worse than my status quo? You really have to stop being in autopilot when you're going through all this stuff, when you're at the store, scrolling, talking with others, and just figure out what is the thesis, what is the end goal, what is the thing that all these various sources are trying to lead me into, and is this actually right for me?
So basically getting out of that doer mode and switching back over into planner mode. And if you've ever wanted an economic take on paying down your credit card debt, they actually got a bunch of economists in the room and asked them for the best way to pay it down if you've got more than one card.
And none of them were Dave Ramsey, as you'll see soon.
And the consensus was this: pay the minimum on each card to avoid any interest charges, transaction fees, whatever penalties, however they word the penalty. Make that minimum to avoid any extra costs. Then focus on the debt and put any available money on that highest interest rate debt. But the irony was, during this research, only 10% of the sample study did this, and the rest were taking strategies that had absolutely nothing to do with interest rate, even though paying down your highest interest rate debt first and avoiding penalties was the, like I said, consensus for the best course of action. Now let's hit really quickly on a couple other areas. Insurance, the ever popular insurance conversation. The authors viewed insurance for catastrophic losses only, stuff that is hard to recover from. And their argument is keep your deductible as large as possible to keep your overall costs down. Now, if something bad does happen, you're going to pay up, but there is the hope there that your long-term savings would be greater than the cost of that deductible if nothing goes wrong. And they also basically said small appliance warranties, if you can easily replace it, you'd probably be better off not buying the insurance, buying the warranty. And a lot of people would lose the paperwork anyways, or not actually take action, as we found with conversations about rebates and things like that as well.
And really, that is what the company is hoping for. You never claim on it, you forget it exists. I think one of the most egregious examples I had was I bought like a $20 or $25 alarm clock from Best Buy, and they tried to sell me a warranty package on it. The warranty package was like 3 times the value of the clock. This is the world we live in today.
And that's because they know that some people will take it, that they're not going to be used or very, very rarely used. And like I said, it doesn't meet the definition of having a catastrophic impact on your life if your alarm clock doesn't work. Well, maybe if you miss something, I suppose. But it's easy to replace. It's low cost, low value. So that's how we saw Nudge. This is a very, very cool book to read because it was both educational and funny. Like, it was really entertaining. And like we said at the very beginning of the show, these authors are decorated. They know their stuff. They know it well. And if you learn nothing else, make it easy and understand that we're fighting against our own nature, our human nature, to not move forward, to stick to the status quo. And we kind of fight ourselves in a sense that we're not always acting in our best interests, even when we think we are. So I guess the caution here is to pay attention. And if you want someone helping out, looking over your shoulder, find us at Braun Financial, braunfinancial.com.
Like many other people have. It's a quick click away.
We're always happy to help. So until next time, take care.
And all the best. Yeah, so this is the field of study that either determines why you spend your money, or if on the other side of it, it determines why you're not spending enough of your money.
react to that?